Scriptures for Friday of Holy Week, starting in Matthew 26, verse 47. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests and elders of the people. John 18, verse 4 gives us a glimpse into what happens next. Then Jesus, because he knew everything that was going to happen to him, came and asked them, "Who are you looking for?" They replied, "Jesus the Nazarene." He told them, "I am he." Now Judas, the one who betrayed him, was standing there with him. So when Jesus said to them, "I am he," they retreated and fell to the ground. Then Jesus asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus replied, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, let these men go." He said this to fulfill the word he had spoken. "I have not lost a single one of all those you've given to me." In Matthew 26, verse 48, it says, "Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, 'The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him.' Immediately he went up to Jesus and said, 'Greetings, Rabbi,' and kissed him. Jesus said to him, 'Friend, do what you are here to do.' Then they came and took hold of Jesus and arrested him. But one of those with Jesus grabbed his sword, drew it out, and struck the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, 'Put your sword back in its place, for all who take hold of the sword will die by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and that he would send me more than 12 legions of angels right now? How then would the scriptures that say it must happen this way be fulfilled?' At that moment, Jesus said to the crowd, 'Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me like you would an outlaw? Day after day I sat teaching in the temple courts, yet you did not arrest me. But this has happened so that the scriptures of the prophets would be fulfilled.' Then all the disciples left him and fled." Mark 14, verse 51 and 52 give us unique detail. It says, "A young man was following them, wearing only a linen cloth. They tried to arrest him, but he ran off naked, leaving his linen cloth behind." Matthew 26 picks up the narrative again in verse 57. "Now the ones who had arrested Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the experts in the law and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him from a distance, all the way to the high priest's courtyard. After going in, he sat with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were trying to find false testimony against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find anything, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, 'This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.' So the high priest stood up and said to him, 'Have you no answer? What is this that they are testifying against you?' But Jesus was silent. The high priest said to him, 'I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God.' Jesus said to him, 'You have said it yourself. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and declared, 'He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? Now you have heard the blasphemy. What is your verdict?' They answered, 'He is guilty and deserves death.' Then they spat in his face and struck him with their fists. And some slapped him, saying, 'Prophesy for us, you Christ. Who hit you?' Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A slave girl came to him and said, 'You also were with Jesus the Galilean.' But he denied it in front of them all. 'I don't know what you're talking about.' When he went out to the gateway, another slave girl saw him and said to the people there, This man was with Jesus the Nazarene. He denied it again with an oath. I do not know the man. After a little while, those standing there came up to Peter and said, You really are one of them too. Even your accent gives you away. At that, he began to curse, and he swore with an oath, I do not know the man. At that moment, a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. Early in the morning, after forming a plan, the chief priests with the elders and the experts in the law and the whole Sanhedrin tied Jesus up, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. In John 18:19, we get a glimpse back into what happens during Jesus' trial, where it says, While this was happening, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus replied, I have spoken publicly to the world. I always taught in the synagogues and in the temple courts, where all the Jewish people assembled together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said. They know what I said. When Jesus had said this, one of the high priest's officers who stood nearby struck him on the face and said, Is that the way you answer the high priest? Jesus replied, If I have said something wrong, confirm what is wrong. But if I spoke correctly, why strike me? Then Annas sent him, still tied up, to Caiaphas the high priest. The scripture continues as they lead Jesus off to Pilate. Matthew 27:3 says, Now when Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus had been condemned, he regretted what he had done and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, What is that to us? You take care of it yourself. So Judas threw the silver coins into the temple and left. Then he went out and hanged himself. The chief priests took the silver and said, It is not lawful to put this into the temple treasury, since it is blood money. After consulting together, they bought the potter's field with it as a burial place for foreigners. For this reason, that field has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 silver coins, the price of the one whose price had been set by the people of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. John 18, verse 28, focuses in on the trial with Pilate. Then they brought Jesus from Caiaphas to the Roman governor's residence. Now it was early morning. They did not go into the governor's residence so that they would not be ceremonially defiled, but could eat the Passover meal. So Pilate came outside to them and said, What accusation do you bring against this man? They replied, If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate told them, Take him yourselves and pass judgment on him according to your own law. The Jewish leaders replied, We cannot legally put anyone to death. This happened to fulfill the word Jesus had spoken when he indicated what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate went back into the governor's residence, summoned Jesus, and asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, Are you saying this on your own initiative, or have others told you about me? Pilate answered, I am not a Jew, am I? Your own people and your chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus replied, My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my servants would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish authorities. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Then Pilate said, So you are a king? Jesus replied, You say that I am a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked, "What is truth?" When he had said this, he went back outside to the Jewish leaders and announced, "I find no basis for an accusation against him." Luke 23:6 adds an interlude here, where we find in verse 6 that Pilate discovers that Jesus is a Galilean. In verse 7, it says, "When he learned that he was from Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who also happened to be in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him because he had heard about him and was hoping to see him perform some miraculous sign. So Herod questioned him at considerable length. Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the experts in the law were there, vehemently accusing him. Even Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, dressing him in elegant clothes, Herod sent him back to Pilate. That very day, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other, for prior to this they had been enemies. Then Pilate called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. When I examined him before you, I did not find this man guilty of anything you accused him of doing. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, he has done nothing deserving death. I will therefore have him flogged and release him." John picks up the story in verse 39 of chapter 18, where Pilate says this, "But it is your custom that I release one prisoner for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" Then they shouted back, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a revolutionary. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged severely. The soldiers braided a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they clothed him in a purple robe. They came up to him again and again and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him repeatedly in the face. Again, Pilate went out and said to the Jewish leaders, "Look, I am bringing him out to you, so that you may know that I find no reason for an accusation against him." So Jesus came outside, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Look, here is the man." When the chief priests and their officers saw him, they shouted out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said, "You take him and crucify him. Certainly I find no reason for an accusation against him." The Jewish leaders replied, "We have a law, and according to our law he ought to die because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard what they said, he was more afraid than ever. And he went back into the governor's residence and said to Jesus, "Where do you come from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Don't you know I have the authority to release you and to crucify you?" Jesus replied, "You would have no authority over me at all, unless it was given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin." From this point on, Pilate tried to release him. But the Jewish leaders shouted out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat down on the judgment seat in the place called the Stone Pavement, Gabbatha in Aramaic. Now it was the day of preparation from the Passover, about noon. Pilate said to the Jewish leaders, "Look, here is your king." Then they shouted out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked, "Shall I crucify your king?" The high priests replied, "We have no king except Caesar." Then Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. Luke 23:26. As they led him away, they seized Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country. They placed the cross on his back and made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of the people followed him, among them women who were mourning and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For this is certain, the days are coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore children, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if such things are done when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Mark 15:22 says they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which is translated place of the skull. They offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Then they crucified him and divided his clothes, throwing dice for them to decide what each would take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And they crucified 2 outlaws with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by defamed him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha, you who can destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, even the chief priests, together with the experts in the law, were mocking him among themselves. He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, that we may see and believe. Those who were crucified with him also spoke abusively to him. Luke chapter 23, Luke gives us greater detail into the story of the 2 criminals. In verse 32, it says, 2 other criminals were also led away to be executed with him. So when they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. But Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." Then they threw dice to divide his clothes. The people also stood there watching, but the leaders ridiculed him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals, who was hanging there, railed at him, saying, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Don't you fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we rightly so, for we are getting what we deserve for what we did, but this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus said to him, "I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise." Mark 15:33. Now when it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. Around 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." Then someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come to take him down." Luke 23 tells us what happens next. where it says that darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. Verse 45, because the light of the sun failed. The temple curtain was torn in two. Verse 46, then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And after he said this, he breathed his last. Verse 47 says, now when the centurion saw what had happened, he praised God and said, certainly this man was innocent. And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breasts. And all those who knew Jesus stood at a distance, and the women who had followed him from Galilee saw these things. Scriptures quoted by permission. All quotes are taken from the Net Bible, copyright 1996-2019 by Biblical Studies Press, LLC. You can find more information at netbible.com. All rights reserved.